Hello my yarny friends, I'm Sara Sach and welcome back to my crochet channel. Today's video I'm going to show you how to crochet the Tropicana Summer top. It's a super easy top. It has a lot of sizes in the pattern from a small all the way up to a 2 extra large. This is a large roomy top, and so you can continue to add on length by adding more rows if you like your tops longer. And it's super easy to adjust, and I'll give you all that information as we work through the pattern. It's basically 2 rectangles. We stitch the 2 shoulders together and then some stitching on the side for the sides. And then you have a fun top that is comfortable and pretty that you can wear over a bathing suit, a sundress, tank top, and also just so pretty that it can go for morning brunch at the beach or wear it with a pretty sundress for an evening dinner. It's beautiful, it's easy, and if you've never ever made any kind of clothing, this is a great place to start because, like I said, it's just 2 rectangles that we make into a fun and roomy summer top. Now, as always, I'll have all the information for the pattern, all the sizes, along with lots of pictures on my blog, and you can find that blog link down in the notes underneath this video. All right, let's talk about the yarn that I used. This is Caron Blossom Cakes. This one is an 8-ounce skein of yarn, or I should say an 8-ounce cake of yarn. It's 61% cotton and 39% acrylic. And I really loved that blend for this summer top because you're getting the lightweightness of a cotton, but the sturdiness of the acrylic. All right, now as far as the amount that you need, I don't want to forget to tell you that it is a medium weight number 4 yarn. Now, I used this. You can use any medium weight number 4 yarn that you want to. You could use an 100% acrylic or 100% cotton or a blend that you really like. Just keep in mind, if it's 100% cotton, it is going to absorb water and moisture and maybe get a little heavy and stretchy. And if you use 100% acrylic, it's going to be a little bit lighter, but not as comfortable to wear. So keep those things in mind when you're looking for your yarns. I really love the blend of the cotton and acrylic together for this type of project. But again, like I say, it's just my opinion. All right, so this one here is called, let's find the color here. It's called Tropical Blooms. And it has lots of yellows and pinks in it and purples. And I absolutely love this one. This one here is another one. It's a Blossom Cakes as well. And this one is called Radiant Rainbow. To me, it reminded me of the colors in the box of crayons. Okay, those are 2 that I picked up at Michael's when I went there a few weeks ago. All right, and so let's talk about amounts of yarn that you're going to need. All right, so if you're going to make a small, you need about 6 ounces. If you're going to make a medium, you're going to need about 7 ounces. If you're going to make a large, about 8 ounces, and that's what this one is, a large. If you make the extra large, you're going to need about 9 ounces, and if you make the 2X, about 10 ounces. So as the sizes go up, of course, you need just a little bit more yarn. And keep that in mind. That is the amounts from the Caron Cake Blossom Cakes medium weight number 4 yarns. All right. Now we're going to be stitching with an eye hook today, which is a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. And that's because we want it to be a little bit loose and open and comfy. We don't want those stitches to be too tight. I will tell you, if you're a tight stitcher, you might even want to go up to the 6 millimeter so that it's nice and loose, because that's what we want, is a nice loose fitting top. You need a needle, of course, for weaving in ends, and then your scissors. So the top that I made for me, I made in the large. I wanted it to be nice, big, and roomy, of course. But for today's demonstration, I'm going to be showing you the small, and then I'm going to be giving you the stitch counts of all the sizes. I'm also going to be using just a solid light pink. That way you can see my stitches better. Sometimes when you use a variegated, unless it's a real distinct variegated, it's really hard to see those stitches. Okay? So, I've got my eye hook and my medium weight number 4 yarn, and I'm going to be making the small size for the demo. So, if you're going to make the small, you need to stitch 60 chains. For the medium, you need to stitch 68. For the large, 76. For the extra large, 84. And for the 2X, 92 chains. So I'm going to make my slip knot, and I'm going to loosely chain 60 chains for our demo. And again, make sure you stitch those just a little bit loose because we're starting at the bottom of our first rectangle, and then we're going to work our way up. And you don't want the bottom of that top to be all squished in. You want it to lay nice and pretty. So stitch those beginning chains just a little bit loose. So we've stitched our beginning chain just a little bit loose. And we're going to begin by stitching a double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. 1, 2, 3, 4. So yarn over, go in that 4th chain, and stitch our double crochet. Now the chain 3 here counts as your first, and then we stitched 1. And we're going to stitch 1 double crochet in each of those chains across. And again, really look at how you're stitching, and if you're stitching tightly, you may want to go up a hook size because this top is needed to be stitched just a little bit loose. That's just the style of it. But if you like your things a little bit more snug, then of course it'll be just fine. The big trick to getting your stitches right as far as your measurements is to take your tape measure and measure as you go or as you work to make sure that it's going to fit. Alright, so I'm going to stitch a double crochet in each of my chains, working all the way across. So I have stitched a double crochet in each of my chains across. We began in the 4th chain from the hook, and this chain 3 here counts as our first double crochet. Alright, so if you are making the small size, you're going to have 58 double crochets. For the medium size, 66. For the large size, 74. For the extra large size, 82. And for the 2X size, you'll have 90 double crochets. Alright, and that's the way that row 1 is stitched. For row 2, we're going to chain 3, and our chain 3 will count as our first double crochet. We're going to turn our work. We'll stitch a double crochet in the next stitch because that chain 3 counts as our first, and then we'll stitch 1 double crochet in each of our double crochets, working all the way across our row. And this is just going to give us a nice foundation on the bottom edge of our top or swimsuit cover, whichever you're going to use it for, or maybe you're going to use it for both. Alright, so 1 double crochet in each of the double crochets, working all the way across our row. So now we've stitched a second row of double crochet, so we just have 2 solid rows of double crochet. I do want to mention that it should be laying flat. If it's laying curved, you've probably stitched your beginning chain too tightly, and you want to make sure that that row is laying nice and flat because you don't want the bottom of your rectangle, which is the bottom of your first side, to be curved. Okay? All right, so I've chained 3 and I'm going to turn my work. Now we're going to double crochet in the next 3 double crochets. And now we're going to begin that fun open work that makes the pretty portion of our top. So we've stitched chain 3, 1 double crochet in the next 3. We're going to chain 2, 1, 2. We're going to skip the next 2 stitches and stitch a double crochet in the next 2. All right, so we'll chain 2, skip 2, and then double crochet in the next 2. Chain 2, skip 2, and double crochet in the next 2. And this will be our repeat across until we end up with 4 double crochets on the end, just like we have here. All right, so we're going to skip 2, chain 2, and 2 double crochets, 1 in each of the next 2, and work all the way across our row. And again, you'll have more stitches if you're making a larger size. And I do recommend, if you normally wear a small, make the medium, because you want this to be loose and comfortable. All right? All righty. So we'll just continue across, chain 2, skip 2, 1 double crochet in the next 2, and repeat. So our chain 3 counted as our first. We stitched 1 double crochet in the next 3, chain 2, skip 2, 1 double crochet in the next 2, and then we repeated it all the way across. And when we come to the end here, here's our chain 2, we're going to skip the last 2 and then double crochet in the last 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. That way we have 4 double crochets at the beginning and end of each row. We're going to chain 3 and turn our work. And this is the way that row 3 should look. And of course, you'll have more stitches in the middle if you made the larger sizes. All right, let's do row 4. So our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. And we're going to double crochet in the next 3. 1, 2, 3. And now we're going to chain 1 and we're going to stitch a shell stitch in between these next 2 double crochets. And our shell stitch is 3 double crochets. And now we're going to chain 1. Then we'll move to the next set of 2 double crochets and stitch a shell stitch in between those 2 double crochet stitches. And chain 1. Move to the next set of 2 double crochets and stitch a shell stitch, which again is 3 double crochets in that, and chain 1. And we'll do this all the way across our row until we reach those 4 double crochets there on the end. So 3 double crochets in between the 2 double crochets, chain 1. And we'll repeat this working all the way across our row. So we stitched our chain 3, which counted as our first double crochet. We stitched 1 double crochet in each of the next 3, chain 1, then we stitched a shell stitch in between those first 2 double crochets. Chain 1, shell stitch, chain 1, shell stitch, all the way across. Then we chained 1 and stitched 1 double crochet in those last 4 stitches. That's the way row 4 should look. Now we're going to chain 3 and turn our work. And again, we'll stitch a double crochet in those 3 double crochets because our chain 3 counted as our first double crochet. And chain 1. And now we're going to stitch a shell stitch in that center double crochet of the next shell stitch. So we'll go to that center one and stitch 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1 and repeat across our row. And so we're stitching our shell stitch in our shell stitch in that center double crochet. And we're going to do this for 2 rows. Shell stitch, chain 1, shell stitch, chain 1, all the way across. Then we'll stitch those 4 double crochets, chain 3, turn, and repeat for 2 more rows of our shell stitches. And that will give us 3 rows of shell stitches. All right, so shell stitch, chain 1, shell stitch all the way across, 4 double crochets in the end of our row, turn and repeat. So this is the way that our first side of our top should look after row 6. We have 2 rows of double crochet. We have the row where we did our 2 double crochets with our chain 2s in between. And then we have 3 rows of shell stitches. And we have those 4 double crochets on each side. Now remember, if you made larger sizes, you're going to have more of these shell stitches across. Now for row 7, we're going to do some rows of mesh style stitching. Our chain 3 still counts as our first double crochet, so we're going to double crochet in those 3 double crochet stitches. And for every row, we will have 4 double crochets at the beginning and end of each row. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to chain 1 and we're going to double crochet in the first double crochet of those 3 shells, or 3 stitches that make up our shell. So double crochet, chain 1, skip the next double crochet, and double crochet in the next. And chain 1. All right, can you see what we did there? We chained 1, we double crocheted in the first double crochet, chain 1, skip the next double crochet, and then double crochet in that third double crochet of the 3 that make up our shell stitch, and chain 1. And that's what we're going to do across. Double crochet in that first double crochet of the next shell stitch, chain 1, skip the next one, and then double crochet in the third one. So we're double crocheting in the first and third of each of our shell stitches with our chain 1s in between. And see how that looks? That's what we're going to do across. And we'll repeat this, working all the way across until we reach those last 4 double crochets. We'll repeat this, working all the way across, and then 1 double crochet in those last 4 double crochets. So now you can see that on row 7 we have this open mesh work all the way across until we reach those last 4. Double crochet in the last 4, chain 3, and turn our work. And now what we're going to do is again stitch a double crochet in the next 3 double crochets. chain 1, double crochet in the double crochet, chain 1, double crochet in the next double crochet, chain 1, double crochet in the next double crochet. And we'll do this working all the way across our row, and then we'll repeat this again, and that will give us 3 rows of our mesh work. All right, chain 3, 1 double crochet in the next 3, chain 1, double crochet, chain 1, double crochet all the way across, again 1 double crochet in the last 4, chain 3, turn, and repeat. So now this puts us at row 9. We have the 2 rows of double crochet, the row where we have the double crochets with the chain 2s in between, 3 rows of shell stitches, and 3 rows of our open mesh work. And this is kind of the way the pattern is going to work. You're going to have 3 rows of shells, then 3 rows of mesh, and then we'll continue to repeat that for the length that we need for our top. So we've chained 3, we're going to turn our work, again double crochet in those next 3 stitches, and chain 1. Now we want our shell stitches to line up. So we'll skip this first chain 1 space and this next double crochet, and we'll stitch a shell stitch in the next chain 1 space. And again, that's 3 double crochets in that same chain 1 space, and chain 1. Again, we'll skip the next chain 1 space and double crochet and stitch a shell stitch in the next chain 1 space. And chain 1. Skip the next space and double crochet and stitch our shell stitch in the next chain 1 space. And make sure you take a look at it and make sure that your shell stitches are lining up nicely. All right, and so we'll repeat this across, and again put those 4 double crochets in that last 4 double crochets. So we're shell stitching, chain 1, skip the chain 1 space and double crochet, shell stitch in the next chain 1 space all the way across. I have completed that row of shell stitches with the 4 double crochets at the beginning and end, and your shell stitches need to line up with your shell stitches from the previous rows. If they're off, then you got off somewhere, and I have done that because I'm watching a TV show and I've gotten them off by accident. All right, because you're going to have the same number as you did down here. And so now what you're going to do for the next 2 rows is repeat what we did down here. You're going to chain 3, turn your work, 3 double crochets in the next 3, chain 1, shell stitch in the center double crochet of each of your shell stitches with chain 1s in between, 4 double crochets on the end, and you're going to do that for 2 more rows. So I completed those next 2 rows of shell stitches. And so what you're going to do is you're going to continue to repeat row 7, row 8, row 9, row 10, row 11, and row 12 for an additional 18 rows. You're going to alternate 3 rows of the shell stitches and 3 rows of the mesh stitches, alternating every 3 rows so that it's the mesh, the shell, the mesh, the shell, the mesh, the shell. Now that's going to get you a length that I prefer. So what you need to do is grab your tape measure and make it the length that you prefer. Sometimes I like to make them a little longer in the back than in the front, and that will work just fine as well. All right, and I did it this way so that you could adjust it to your length, because something that drives me crazy is just because I wear a large size doesn't mean that I want it longer. If I was wearing a 3X, that doesn't mean that I want it to go to my ankles. I'm still short. Okay, and so by doing it this way where you can adjust that length, then you can do the length that you need for you. For me, I'm going to be repeating these rows for 18 more rows, alternating 3 rows of mesh and 3 rows of shell. And once you've done that, then you can look at that and ask yourself, is that long enough? Because once we do those rows, then we're going to add 2 more rows to the top of that rectangle. And then we're going to make a second one. So we have 2 rectangles to work with. So I have repeated rows 7 through 9, alternating every 3 rows. So here's my 2 rows of double crochet. Then there's that row of individual where we double crocheted 2 and skipped 2, chain 2. So then I have 3 shells, 3 mesh, 3 shells, 3 mesh, 3 shells, 3 mesh, 3 shells, 3 mesh, and 3 shells. This is the length that I want. When I add the next 2 rows and then put the 2 together, it's going to make a top or cover up that's about 22 inches long. So if you want it to be longer, you can do that after this next row, or you can add more repeats of the 3 rows of mesh and shell. But what I think is best is we're going to do the next row, which is a repeat like this, which is row 7. So we'll chain 3. We'll turn our work, and then we'll repeat row 7. And then we're going to do a solid row of double crochet. All right. And so now I'm actually working on my top, the one that's for me. All right. And so once we finish on our 3 shell rows, we're going to do another row of the mesh row. So I'm going to stitch 2 double crochets, or I should say 3 double crochets. We're going to chain 1, and we'll do that double crochet in the first double crochet of the shell stitch, chain 1, and then double crochet in the second. So we have 1 in the first, we skip the next, and then 1 in the next, and we're doing that mesh row. And this is the rows that you should add if you want to add length at the top of your top or cover up. You can do as many rows of the mesh as you would like, or you can do repeats of the mesh rows and the shell rows. Just grab your tape measure and do as many rows as needed for the length that you would like. Like I said, I'm a little bit shorter, and so I want mine to be a little bit shorter. But if you're a tall person and you want it to be taller, you can do as many rows as you would like for the length that you would like. My thing is I like it to go down to the bottom of my bum, and I think that's where it should sit. But if you want it longer, you could make it as long as you want. Make it go all the way to your ankles if you want to. I think that would be beautiful. But of course, you're going to need a lot more yarn. All right, I'm going to finish this mesh row across. I completed that mesh row with the 4 double crochets at the beginning and the end of the row. I chained 3, and we're going to turn our work. And now we're just going to stitch a double crochet in those first 3, of course, because that's what we've been doing on every row. Our double crochet counts as our chain 3 counts as the first, and then 3 double crochets. Now we're going to double crochet in the chain 1 space, double crochet in the double crochet, double crochet in the chain 1 space, and double crochet in the double crochet. And so what we are doing here is doing a solid row of double crochet so we can join our 2 pieces together. Now again, if you want more length on your top or bathing suit cover up, you can repeat the 3 shell stitch rows and the 3 mesh rows, or you can just do several of the mesh rows at the top just to give it some more length. Either way will work just fine and look very pretty. All right, and then once you've added the length that you need or want, do 1 row of double crochets just like I'm doing here. All right, then we'll tie off, weave in the ends on this one, and repeat rows 1 through 32 so that we have a front and a back to our top. All right, so I'm just going to continue working across, stitching my double crochets, and then I'll tie off and weave in my ends and make a second rectangle. So here's my first rectangle all completed. We have the 1 row of double crochet up here with 1 row of mesh, and then all those rows alternating 3 rows of mesh and shell stitches. And we started down here with our 2 rows of double crochet and those alternating 2 rows or 2 stitches of double crochet that we began our shell stitches in. All right, there's the one, and then I made a second one. So now I have 2, and you need to make 2 rectangles. And again, the length is up to you. Sometimes I like to make the back of them a little bit longer than the front. That way it hangs down over my bum a little bit more, but it's totally up to you. And now we're going to sew or stitch the top together. And it's a really simple process. The first square or rectangle, I went ahead and weaved in all my ends. And then on the second one, I only weaved in the one at the bottom and I left the yarn attached. All right. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put them together, and you need to decide which side you want to be the front and which side you want to be the back. All right. And so I've got mine all set up because we're going to be stitching on the outside. You want your front out facing out and your wrong sides on the inside. But again, it's totally up to you how you want those to be. Because we stitched back and forth, it looks just as pretty on the back side as it does on the front side. All right, we're going to start over here in this corner, and I'll show you how to stitch it together. We're going to stitch around the neck and then stitch the other side to form the shoulders. Now we're going to be stitching the front and the back together, starting at the corner in order to form the first corner. Now, if you're stitching the small size, you're going to do 10 stitches. If you're doing the medium size, you're going to do 12. If you're doing the large, you're going to stitch 14. If you're doing the extra large, you're going to stitch 16 stitches. And if you're doing the 2X, 18 stitches. That's just a standard. You do not have to do that set number of stitches because I don't want that many. And so you can adjust that. Okay, it's up to you how wide you want that shoulder portion to be. So after I finished this last row of double crochets, I did not cut my yarn and I chained 1. All right, so I'm going to go through the first stitch on this side and the first stitch on this side, and I'm going to stitch a single crochet. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And so that's going to form my first shoulder portion. Again, you can take a look at that. If that's too many stitches, you want it more narrow, add less stitches, all right? And so now what we're going to do is we're going to only stitch on the back portion of it until we leave the same number of stitches over here as we have over here. So I'm going to stitch single crochets only in the back of the stitches. And I'm going to do this across until I only have 12 stitches left, because I stitched 12 here and I want to make sure that I leave 12 for this side. All right, and this also helps us get that neckline nice. Let me move that yarn out of the way there, so that it has a nice little trim around the neck. So I'm stitching single crochets across until I have 12 stitches left on this side. So I single crocheted from where we stopped our 12 across the back of my top until I only had 12 stitches left. You want to make sure you have the same amount on both sides of your top. And then we'll put those together. And stitch those, single crocheting them together to form the second shoulder. There's 10, 11, and 12. Now we're going to chain one and we're going to turn. Okay, and I want you to see how this looks. Here's where we did our first 12. Here's where we single crocheted across the back, and then we stitched our next 12 over here. And remember, this number is totally up to you and how wide you want your shoulder to be. We chained one and turned, and now we're going to slip stitch in those 12 stitches. So 11 and there we go, 12. And this brings us back to the front. And so now we're going to single crochet across the front of our top. And that gives us again a nice little edge, helps it hold its shape, and just looks pretty to have a nice little edge there. And so now I'm going to single crochet across the front till I reach back where we started those 12 single crochets over here on the first side. So now we've single crocheted across the other side. So both sides have a single crochet row on it. Here's where we slip stitched, we single crocheted and then slip stitched back across, and then single crocheted across. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to go in those 12 stitches and slip stitch across those. That way it looks the same on both sides and also gives us a nice clean finish for the top of our top. And then once we finish this, all we have left to do is the sides. And sewing the sides closed is super duper easy. Alrighty, so we're going to cut our end, tie that off, grab our needle and weave this in. Now as far as a front and a back, it's up to you. It's made exactly the same on both sides, and so it's completely up to you which you want to be the front and which you want to be the back. Try it on, see how it fits, see which one lays better on the front. And so this is how the top of your top should look. We have our 12 stitches or however many you want for your shoulder. We have our neck opening. We single crocheted around, and then our other stitches on this side. All right, and remember, the amount of stitches you have here and here depends on the size you're making, but also, even if you're making a 3X or 4X and you don't want very much on your shoulders, you can add just a small amount of stitches. It's totally up to you and what's most comfortable for you. All right, now this is the outside of it. And now we're going to do the side. So we're going to take it and flip it over so that the wrong sides are out. All right, now grab your tape measure. You're going to need it. So now we're going to go by measurement and not by stitch count for where we place the opening for our arm and close up the side. All right, so what I do is I just measure from the top and I measure down. Now, if you're making the small size, you want to measure to 6. If you're making the medium size, you want to measure to 7. If you're making the large, 8. If you're making the extra large, 9. And if you're making the 2X, 10 inches. And this is for you to see the armhole size. All right, and then you're going to join where you want to. And so we're going to do right here at 8 inches. I'm going to put my hook there. And then from there, you're going to measure the same amount. All right, so I'm only going to do 8 inches. All right, and so I'm going to put my pen there so I know where to stop. Okay, so the same measurement you have at the top is the same measurement you're going to have here for how long you're going to make the side. All right, now let me grab my other ball of yarn here. So what we're going to do is we're going to join in our yarn on the side and make sure you go through a stitch and not a hole. Grab that yarn real quick there. There we go. Make a real quick chain 1. And then we're just going to slip stitch it closed. Now I've got it marked where I'm going to start and I've got it marked where I'm going to end, but I want to make sure that the bottom of my top is even also. Now if you made yours longer in the back, take that into consideration because I do that sometimes when I'm making a top. All right. So now, let's move my yarn out of the way here. We're going to slip stitch the side closed. And remember, this is the inside of our work. All right, and we're going to go through and just stitch slip stitches. We want to try to go in the sides of the stitches and not the holes, but that is a little bit difficult when we've stitched in our mesh sections and double crochets, and also stitch this loosely, not tight, because you don't want it to bunch up on you on your sides and gather up. You want it to be comfortable to wear. All right, so we're just slip stitching the amount that we want on the side. And there's not a set number of stitches that you need. It just needs to look pretty and loose and comfortable. And also remember, the measurements that I have given may not be what you want. You may want less amount in here sewed closed. So you would do less stitches. This pattern is very versatile and easy to adjust for length, for width, and for armhole and side measurements. It's basically two rectangles that we're making into a fun summer top. And again, keep that open, loose, and stretchy, and yet secure. Almost to my pen. Whoops. We don't want the side to come undone when we're playing out at the beach, so make sure you do this securely and weave in your end securely. That could be a little bit embarrassing, huh? All right, so I'm right where my pen is. I'm going to move that, my needle. Cut my yarn. And now I'm going to take my needle and weave in both these ends super securely. But that's the way that it should look. And I'm going to weave this in a bunch because I want this to stay put. I do not want my top coming undone. That looks pretty secure. There we go. It just came right back out. All right. Now I'm going to do this other one, and then I'll do the other side, and my top will be all finished. Now I've stitched up both sides. I made sure that everything is even. Here's the bottom, here's the top. And now we're going to flip it back over to the right side. Alrighty, isn't that beautiful? Here's the neck opening. And then we have side openings at the bottom. And if you don't want those, you can stitch it all the way down to the bottom. I just like it. I think it makes it lay better and flow nicely. Isn't that beautiful? That's our Tropicana Summer Top and Bathing Suit cover-up. And remember, the width, the length, all the adjustments on the side are super easy to do, and it's a great way to learn how to make a simple top.